Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Bauer Tarot, and I'd like to invite you on a journey to transforming the tarot. Today, we will be transforming the John Bauer Tarot into an intuitive deck. This tarot celebrates the art of Swedish painter and illustrator John Bauer. During his short life, as he passed away at the age of 36, he was best known for his illustrative work in Among the Gnomes and Trolls, an anthology of Swedish folklore and fairy tales. He incorporated landscapes and mythology into his art, which you can see beautifully depicted in this tarot. Among his favorite subjects to paint were the landscapes of his home country, the folklore of Europe, and the interplay between the two. In 2018, Lo Scarabeo released the John Bauer Tarot, using images or parts of his paintings to create the 78 cards of the tarot. The little white book encourages you to allow the images to spark a conversation between you and the meanings. As you flip through the booklet, you will find that some of the descriptions follow a more traditional interpretation, while others primarily go its own way. As I worked with this deck, I found that most often the cards themselves would tell me a different story, one that did not adhere to tradition or the meanings in the booklet. I created my own little white book for this deck, combining the artwork, the guidebook, and my own intuitive understanding into a single key phrase for each of the cards. But even then, these cards often detoured, taking me down the winding path and into the fantastical landscapes to learn their deeper lessons. After working with this deck for several months, I found that I had stopped paying any attention to the card number or suit associations and read this deck strictly intuitively, letting the artwork tell me its story. In fact, the titles had become a distraction, trying to pull me back to my foundational knowledge rather than letting the cards tell me the story they wanted me to hear. Since those titles had become bothersome, I decided it was time to remove them, to free the artwork, and to let this deck serve its purpose as an intuitive tool and storyteller. For this process, we will be removing the borders and titles, as well as rebacking the deck in contact paper, not only to reinforce it and hopefully straighten out this bow, but also because I'm just not a fan of these backs. So I hope you will join me today as we transform the John Bauer Tarot together. Alright, so let's begin by taking a quick peek at the deck as it comes originally. So it has titles on the top and bottom, so you can see the number at the top and the suit association on the bottom here. Let's take a flip through, so you have the Four of Wands, the Five of Cups, and then for the majors, we just have the number of the card repeated on the top and bottom. So we're going to be trimming those off, but before I do that, I am actually going to reback this deck because I'm not really sure what is going on here with these backs. I'm just not a fan, and I don't like the color. I just don't think the color goes, that red, I just don't think it goes really well with this really sort of earthy neutral color or natural colored deck. I just don't feel that the red goes very well, and it just, I don't know, just not a fan. So I'm going to reback it. So I'm going to be using this sort of darker wood grain for these cards, which I think is going to go really lovely with this deck. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and get started on the process. Okay, so here you can see that I have rebacked a handful of the cards here, and I've just trimmed away the excess. I was a little bit more careful trimming on the sides because those are not going to get cut. but I didn't worry too much about the tops or the corners because I'm going to actually, once I get all of these done, I'm going to take these to my trimmer and I'm just going to trim off the titles and then corner around them, and then that will ensure that my corners on my backing actually are perfectly rounded rather than trimming it, rounding it, and then going back and adding the contact paper. So you can see here that I have a couple of them done. They've been rebacked. So this is what the backs are going to look like now as opposed to what they are currently. And I think I'm going to like this so much better. So there, we have our first few cards rebacked, and I'm going to go ahead and finish up rebacking the rest of my cards here, and then we will jump ahead to trimming and corner rounding these cards. Okay, I have finished rebacking the entire deck. Now I have all of the 78 cards rebacked in this brown. As you can see, there were a couple that I cut my strips too short. I guess I just probably, as I was using my lines, I just got off a line is really what happened. But since I'm cutting the tops and bottoms off, the contact paper is, as you can see, does cover where the artwork is. So it really wasn't that big of a deal because this is going to get cut off anyway. But, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work. So this should be a pretty easy process. I mean, there's 78 cards, so it's going to take me a few minutes. But overall, as far as a trimming job goes, this is going to be one of the quickest and easiest that I've probably ever done because I'm only trimming 2 sides. Once I get those 2 sides off, then I'm going to go back and corner around them. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to move this out of the way. And as I'm shifting all my stuff around, you can see now I'm just down to just the beautiful artwork. And let's hope I don't miss those borders. So I'm going to just keep at it, trim the tops and bottoms off these cards, and then we'll come back and do the corner rounding. Alright, I have finished taking all of the tops and bottoms off of the cards. You can see them all here. Let's just go ahead and move those out of the way. And here we have our very sharp-edged. Here we have our trimmed deck. So now we have this nice little art only deck, which is going to be great for intuitive readings. And you can see the backs here. I think look much better with just this wood grain on them. So now it's time to go ahead and corner round them. So I have my Katamaro Pro here, which is the only corner rounder I use, and I talked about that in my trimming video as well as compared it to a couple of others. So if you want to take a look at that, I'm going to start with the small because while I can always punch a bigger corner, I can't punch a smaller corner once I've punched a big one. So we're just going to start with the small and see how it goes. I don't know if I want to go bigger or leave it. The more I look at it, the more it's kind of growing on me. I think with the more rounded corners, it just gives it a softer look. But this looks more like a painting. With the not with the smaller round corners, it looks more like a painting. So actually, yeah, I think I am going to stick with the small on this deck. I don't generally do that, but I think for this one, I'm going to stick with the smaller corners. Okay, so enough about that. Yeah, you see, it's an important decision, right? If I go bigger, I can't make it smaller. So, it's a super important decision. Maybe some wouldn't agree that this is a super important decision, but it is for me. So I'm going to go with the small, and I'm just going to keep at it. Because this is thicker now that I've got this card stock on it, the corner rounder is struggling a little bit. And to be perfectly honest, it would be an easier process both on my hand, which is already getting sore because I'm having to press harder than normal, and the corner rounder. If I was using the medium, it would be easier on it because of where that arm hits, I think, and where the pressure point is to press down on it. This one, I can tell you right now, my hand's getting sore, so gonna have to be taking a couple breaks. So I'm gonna finish up this one, give my hand and my corner punch a little break, and I'll work on this, and we'll come back at the end when I have them all done and work on edging. Okay, so I have finished rounding all the corners, and you know, I did it a few cards at a time, came back, did a few more, because like I said, these are quite thick with the contact paper on the back of them. You know, they're not even as thick as like a shiffer deck, but they are thicker than they were before, and it's just a bit difficult for the corner runner to go through them. So, you know, doing too many, it makes my hand hurt. So I just, you know, take breaks. And here's the backs. You know, they're all wood grain now. And the cards are a lot sturdier now. And one of the things I love about rebacking a card in contact paper, even though it is very time consuming, it's definitely a labor of love, but these things are super durable once you do that. I have a couple decks that I've rebacked in contact paper, and they're just like, they're super durable now. And I do really like that about rebacking a deck. So now it's time to edge. We're done with the corner rounder. So I was just kind of playing with some different colors and some different markers. I think I am going to do this in marker just because while I really do like ink pads, markers faster, and I've already put quite a bit of time into this deck. So I was just kind of playing with some different colors. I'm going to go ahead and go with the brown and just make it match the backs and call it good. So this, if you've probably seen deck edgings before. This is a really quick and easy process, particularly with the Crayolas. And then sometimes I do have to go back and touch up. And this brown, because I've edged a couple of decks in it, is it's kind of groovy now, and not in a good way. But there you can see I've got, I didn't get any bleed over into the deck, and it has a brown edge now. Okay, so I got not quite half, but you can still see a good chunk of them done, and you can definitely see the difference in this between the white or the raw edges. Really, they're not really white, they're just raw because I've trimmed it, to the brown edge. So I think that just, you know, I do have a little bit of spots that I need to go back and touch up. So you can see here we get a nice finished looking deck. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish up the rest of these, and then we'll come back and take a look at the completely transformed John Bauer Tarot. So I have finished up edging this deck. So now we have these beautiful brown edges. So you can see here, we have a beautifully trimmed deck with no borders, no numbers, no suit associations, and we have completely rebacked this deck. So now it has the wood green looking contact paper on it. And as you can see, the rebacking and trimming it actually did straighten out that bow a little bit. And I think it just looks absolutely beautiful now as a strictly intuitive deck. Like I said, you can probably still find some associations to your standard 78 tarot structure in this deck. There are certainly cards that I recognize from having used this deck quite frequently. So when they show up, I do still know that that used to be, you know, the Fool, or that used to be Temperance, or what have you. But I still think for using this deck for intuitive readings, I think it just works beautifully for it. So, I mean, look how gorgeous those images are, and they tell a beautiful story when you put them all together like this. And now I won't be distracted by the titles and the suit associations and that sort of thing, because I do like to work with this deck strictly intuitively. And I think now it just makes for an absolutely beautiful intuitive deck that is just really well suited for kind of your more storytelling reading. So look at a reading and find the story within. And I think this deck really shines for that purpose. And I think having removed the borders has made that just an even more profound experience. So that is the completely transformed John Bauer Tarot. We have taken it from a standard tarot deck to a completely intuitive deck, which allows the artwork to tell us the story. Now you could also have just, you know, written the names of the cards on the bottom, and that would have worked beautifully as well. That way you could know what card was intended to be for what position. I wanted this as a strictly intuitive deck, so I did not do that, but you certainly could if you wanted to retain the titles, suits, and numbers for this deck. So that is always an option. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this process of transforming the John Bauer Tarot into an intuitive deck. I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.